If you've ever put your music on the internet, you might unknowingly be leaving yourself extremely vulnerable by believing these copyright myths. So many songwriters end up getting confused and ignoring copywriting, thinking you need a law degree or thousands of dollars to protect your music, but that's wrong. And in this video, I'm teaming up with Marcus from Protect My Work, who's been helping creators protect their work for over 2 decades, to break down in the simplest terms how to protect your music without expensive lawyers, how to avoid accidentally stealing from other artists, and the biggest copyright myths that could end up costing you thousands. Look, if you're putting your music anywhere on the internet these days, even for fun, there's some basic stuff you really should know, so you can sidestep things like losing control of your creative work, missing out on royalties, or even facing legal battles that could have easily been avoided. Copyright might seem complicated, but think of it like building a treehouse. You put all that hard work and planning into building something special, and you don't want someone to just come along and treat it like it's theirs. Of course not. It's yours, and you should get to decide who comes in and who doesn't.
Hey, Billy! Hey, Joey! Come on in! There's plenty of room! Sorry, not you, Homer.
Why not?
Copyright is just a fancy way of saying that this belongs to me and I get to decide how it's used, which means you can go ahead and sell your music, share it, create new versions like remixes, and perform it live, all with the peace of mind that you have full control over how your work is used, you get the proper recognition as the creator, and all the revenue goes to you. But maybe more importantly, understanding how copyright works gives you the knowledge to make sure that you're not the one accidentally stealing someone else's work. So let's bust some common myths about what copyright does and does not cover, so you can not only protect yourself but make sure you're not on the wrong end of a copyright strike, or even worse, a lawsuit. This first myth is one of the most common, and it also causes the most confusion. Sampling. So the myth is sampling is okay if it's less than 6 seconds, or you can use 3 seconds of any song. So how much of other people's music can you legally sample without having to pay for it? Well, the truth is, there is no legal amount you can sample without the permission from the original copyright owner. Copying or using other people's music, accidentally or not, is plagiarism. So let's look at exactly what copyright does and does not protect in your music. Copyright does protect specific melody lines, your exact lyrics, your unique arrangement of a song, and your sound recordings. But copyright doesn't protect things like chord progressions, which is why you'll hear the 4 same chords in thousands of songs. Doesn't protect themes or concepts, so you can go ahead and finish that song about falling in love on a hot summer night without having to worry. And it doesn't protect song titles. That's why artists like Santana, Wilson Phillips, and Kansas have all had big hits with songs called Hold On. Now, what a lot of people already know this, there's one dangerous copyright myth out there that could not only end up ruining the excitement of you releasing your music, but more importantly cost you thousands in legal fees, especially if you're an independent artist. If you've ever looked up anything about copyright before, you've probably come across things like you need to file lots of paperwork, pay fees, or formally register your songs with an official body before they're protected by copyright law. Well, that's a bit like saying you need a marriage certificate before you fall in love. Let me show you what I mean. After winning his Shape of You case, Ed Sheeran said something that really stuck with me.
I feel like claims like this are way too common now and have become a culture where a claim is made with the idea that a settlement will be cheaper than taking it to court, even if there's no base for the claim. There's only so many notes and very few chords used in pop music. Coincidence is bound to happen if 60,000 songs are being released every day on Spotify.
And he's right, because these days it feels like there's some big huge new court case every week for copyright infringement, and for independent artists releasing music, that can cause a lot of invisible stress. Instead of focusing on what matters, getting your music out, you end up being trapped in this cycle of anxiety about some legal nonsense. But the truth is, as soon as you write down those lyrics, record a melody, or save a session file, your work is automatically protected by copyright. But here's the crucial part they don't tell you. While copyright is automatic, proving that you're the original creator is where it can get tricky. And this is where I'm calling in some expert help. I jumped on a call with Marcus from Protect My Work to cut through all the nonsense and big city legal speak to talk about how you can properly protect your creative work. What works, what's a waste of time, and he shared with me the easiest way that you can protect your work without becoming a legal expert or spending loads. Marcus, let's talk about AI for a second.
Sure.
What are the basic things that musicians and songwriters need to know about creating with, whether it be lyrics or music with AI these days?
So copyright and AI is still, let's say, developing. The US and Europe recently have joined idea, as in they're thinking along the same line, and that is, as long as you are, from a human element, adding and let's say prompting, because it's ultimately what you do in order to create a unique piece of work, it is something that you can own the copyright and the intellectual property for. So as long as there's an input from you, it's something that you can copyright. So the best way to handle that would be, I mean, if you're using ChatGPT, which we all use in some form these days, would be to make sure that you keep a record of that conversation, keep a record of your prompts, what you changed in there, to show, if you were ever asked the fact that you used AI, what your input element was, you'd be able to show it. If you just asked, write me a song with 3 verses and ChatGPT spit it out, that would become questionable whether you could copyright that or not, because there's no input, or there's no element from you in there. So that's where it stands right now. It's gonna change and adapt as time goes on. There's all kinds of copyright proposals and intricacies involved in it, but that's where it is right now.
It kind of sounds like you're working with a co-creator kind of approach.
Funny enough, I get quite a few calls, and we get quite a few disputes of where people have written something together, and then for whatever reason they'll break up later on, and then who owns what. So the way it works as a default with law is you are equal, let's say, shareholders of the song, the lyrics, the recording, unless it's otherwise stated. So it's really important in music to identify who's going to own what part of the copyright. So if there's 3 of you and you're going to split it equally, a third, it's no problem. That's the default it would be if you ended up in court anyway. But if I'm, let's say, writing the lyrics, and then you hire somebody else to put the music together, so there's not that much in point, and there's 2 of you, I might want 70%, because I've done most of the work on that track. The rest of it was outsourced, you could say. So it will save a lot of time, energy, and stress if that's a conversation that you have at the beginning of the whole process, whether creating a band, and that's the way it's going to be from there on. You will all own X amount of the copyright, therefore royalties and all that kind of stuff. It saves a lot of hassle. I get a lot of calls where singers and songwriters will call up part of a band and say, they've now split up, and they're trying to stop whoever's left in the band from playing the music, receiving the royalties. And at that point, it becomes quite difficult, and you're going down a road with court and legal fees and all that kind of stuff, which nobody wants. So get it all agreed at the beginning, put something on paper, sign it, get a witness to sign it, draw up it doesn't have to be a big legal contract, but just draw up something so it's clear. And if there's a dispute later, if you do split up, you've got it all covered. Everyone can go their separate ways, be happy with how it is, and get on with life.
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty common issue that you come across. All right.
Yeah, it's not what you think. I had a call, it would have been maybe 2 or 3 months ago, from a woman who, bless her, she'd lost her husband. He died, and he was part of a band, and the band were trying to basically remove his rights from the songs that he'd written and worked on and all this kind of thing. And she, it wasn't even down to any money. They weren't really making any money, but it was for his memory that she didn't want his name removed, from things like that. And so she was calling me, quite upset, saying that they're trying to basically just delete him from what he did. And you're just thinking, why would anyone do that? Honor the guy, But people do weird things in weird situations, and it's just better.
Yeah, it kind of brings out the worst in people sometimes, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. What was funny is I asked her, I said, is there some big money involved here? She says, no, not really. There's a little bit of royalties that they make from whatever, Spotify or whatever, but it's nothing significant. She didn't care about the money. She just didn't want him removed, him deleted from everything. So anyway, I felt really sorry for her, but I just thought, wow, that's, I can understand people arguing about money in a case like that, but where you're not even arguing about money, people will just argue over the weirdest things. They really will. But,
yeah.
I hear a lot of stories where it does come to an end, and then it's a big mess. So it's just worth thinking about at the beginning, because while everybody's friends, you can get something agreed and sign, and then everybody knows where they are. But yeah, I mean, it's natural when you're starting something out, the excitement of it and putting it all together. Building it is fun. Cracks can appear later, and then it's not so fun.
Yeah. So say, okay, say most people are going to completely ignore that advice, and the split has happened, and you realize someone has actually used uh your work and is kind of making money off it. Like, what can you do in that stage?
Ultimately, what you've got to do when it comes to copyright, and this is true in music and any other creative work, copyright applies to all creative work. So music, lyrics, songs, all of this thing, as well as books and photos, anything. It's going to come down to what proof you have. Copyright ultimately is an automatic right. Okay. So as an individual, in simple terms, if I take a photo on my phone, I automatically own the copyright to that photo. I don't have to register it anywhere. And if that photo is either copied or used without my permission, I have to be able to prove that it's my photo. But which sounds great and less hassle. You don't have to pay any fees. You don't have to get, register it anywhere. But the issue is, how do I prove that that photo was taken on my phone? You can't really do it unless you start going into the minute detail of the data that's held within the photo and the phone, which can also be changed. So to answer the question, what you've got to do is keep proof of the work that you've done and the fact that it's yours. Okay. And that will be the simplest way to solve it later, as long as it's indisputable, because then that's the problem with proof. Because if I say, well, I wrote the lyrics for that song, it's on a sheet of paper and I put the date at the top, it becomes, that can be disputed. And they can say, well, you could have written that yesterday, So you just have to think it through. That's what Protect My Work was set up for, was the point that we act as an independent witness.
It's important, and especially in this day and age, with everything that's going on, especially like as we were talking about with AI and everything like that. Yeah. So we're basically talking about you need something, you need proof, and it needs to be kind of irrefutable proof from, say, like a third party, like protectmywork.com or something like that.
Yeah.
You hear about these, you can send a letter, mail it to yourself, or you can email it to yourself, or
yeah, there's the two most common ways that people think of is that you can send yourself a letter with the lyrics inside, and then once you've posted that, it's called the poor man's copyright. And it used to maybe be a thing going back many years ago, where you would print out the lyrics, you would put them in an envelope, and you'd post it to yourself. If you're in dispute over something, let's say someone's used your work without permission, and they've used it in a video on YouTube, for you to have it removed from YouTube, you can't send YouTube an envelope and say, my lyrics are inside there, have a look. So it doesn't really work anymore. And there was flaws in that anyway, because you could send yourself an empty envelope. You could send yourself an empty envelope that wasn't sealed and get it stamped, and then stuff work into it after. And emailing your work, there's people out there that will say just email your work to yourself, which sort of makes sense. But the problem with that is, if you have to then send that, let's say, to YouTube as your proof of work, proof of date, and that is your work, you have to print that email in some form, print it to a PDF. Well, everybody knows that you can edit a PDF, no problem. You can do that within PDF software. So you're going to then send that on to whoever, your third party that you need to prove your work to, but a PDF doesn't really prove anything. So the only way that you would really be able to do it is you'd have to contact your ISP and get them to verify that you did send this email on this date and time, and that's never going to happen.
Yeah. And so then what's the other option? Is the big official kind of sending it off to the...
Yeah. So you on the way to do it would be overall, because a lot of these platforms, YouTube, all the Amazon, Spotify, and all that, they're all based in America. So what the official way to do it would be to submit it to the US Copyright Office, okay, which is the government body that protects copyright in the US, okay? But because it's a government body in the US, that would be recognized by many other places in the world. The issue with that is you have to pay per submission. And I think it's about $50, $60, $70, somewhere around that. I'm not exactly sure. And being that it's a government website, I've actually done it just to see exactly how it works. It's not that intuitive. It takes a while to figure out your way around the website. They haven't exactly developed this from a user perspective. It's probably done by tech bods somewhere. So it takes a while to figure out. Obviously, once you've figured it out, you get used to the process, but it's expensive and it does take a long time. As with any government agency, it's not something that you hear back from quickly. So, it takes anywhere from sort of 3-4 months up to 8-9 months, even 12 months. I've seen online, and I've heard from people that call me where they don't have their proof. They submitted it to the US Copyright Office. They've got a problem either now or, something happened 3-4 months later, and they can't prove anything with their copyright other than they've submitted something. So that, doesn't quite work so well either, even though, of course, it is the official body. The US government, you're not going to get anything sort of better than that. But if you're creating work weekly, monthly, something like that, it's not that realistic to spend the money and wait for everything to come back. And really, ultimately, the only reason the US adheres to the same law as the rest of the world, which is copyright is automatic. You don't have to register it anywhere. But what the US says is, if you're going to sue in federal US court, you have to have it registered with the US Copyright Office, which doesn't mean you have to have it registered from the day you created it. It just has to be registered there. So and there's two things with that. To go to federal court in the US, ultimately you need a lawyer to do that. So you're already down the road of what's going to be significant money and a huge length of time as far as process in federal court. And at least from my end of being on the end of the phone with Protect My Work, the ultimate aim is to remove the work from being used, not necessarily to sue the other person, even for damages. It's just stop using my work, I want it removed. So you don't really need federal court for that. So yeah, that would be, you got the upside and the downside of it, but no one really goes to federal court, especially if you're not American. Trying to take a federal court case in the US, I'm British, I'm not really going to do it. So that's why we created Protect My Work, which is a UK company, but over the last 25 years, we've built a bit of a reputation where we're trusted, and Amazon, Spotify, they will recognize our certificates. So you can submit the work to us. We charge a yearly fee. It's about £42 a year, $55 or so. You can log in, you can create an account, you register it online. You'll get an email with a password in it. You log into your account with that password, and you just upload your Word document or photo of the lyrics, whatever it may be. You can upload a recording, an MP3, whatever you need, you can upload that. And you'll get approved. We keep a copy of that work on our server. We create a digital certificate. There's a unique reference number and the details of who owns that copyright. And you can share that digital certificate with whoever you need to, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, whoever, any third party. You get a shareable link. And that just makes it that bit easier to prove your work. We're independent witness, and overall, yeah, it works.
Cool. And so that's immediate, is it? Like, you're not gonna have to wait like you would with the US office, or?
No, it's immediate. Once you log in and it's uploaded, it takes a few minutes. The digital certificate is displayed right there, and it's saved in an area called Your Work. And you can share that at any point you need in the future. You can refer back to it, and you can use it as a backup as well. If you ever lost the files for any reason, we'd have a copy of them. So yeah, it's all immediate. Everything happens. You can get registered and upload work within about 10 minutes. For most songwriters, I'd suggest a hybrid approach. You can use protectmywork.com to establish like a clear ownership from day one, and then you can choose which songs you want to register with your official bodies like the US Copyright Office, or whatever the equivalent is in your country. And the best part is you can get a 20% discount with protectmywork.com if you use the link in the description. Like Ed Sheeran said, there's only so many notes in music, and that's why melodies are one of the things that end up getting copied so much. And after years of trial and error, I finally discovered a simple 3-step system that can turn any melody from a rip-off into something shiny, new, and unique to you. So watch this video next so you can learn how to change how you write melodies forever.